The Sodder children, the Christmas Eve mystery that never ended. Christmas Eve, 1945. In the small town of Fayetteville, West Virginia, the Sodder family was preparing for Christmas. George and Jennie Sodder had 10 children, and their home was filled with the usual noise of a large family preparing for the holiday. Presents were waiting, the children were excited, and the family expected to wake up together on Christmas morning. They never got that chance. Before sunrise, their home would be destroyed by fire, and 5 of their children would disappear. What makes this case so disturbing is not simply that 5 children were apparently killed in a house fire. It is what happened afterward. No confirmed remains of the 5 children were ever identified. Their parents never accepted that they had died in the flames, and for decades they searched for evidence that their children might have survived. Did 5 children die inside that burning house? Or did someone remove them before the fire destroyed the building? More than 80 years later, we still don't have a definitive answer. George Sodder had been born in Italy and immigrated to the United States as a young man. He eventually settled in West Virginia, married Jennie, and built a successful life for his family. George was hardworking, outspoken, and proud of his Italian heritage. He also held strong political opinions and was openly critical of Benito Mussolini and Italian fascism. That detail would later become important because the family believed George had made enemies. But in 1945, his main concern was his family. George and Jennie had 10 children, ranging from teenagers to 5-year-old Betty. Their house outside Fayetteville was a busy family home, and Christmas Eve was supposed to be a happy night. Several of the children stayed awake late. Eventually, the family settled down for the night. Then, sometime after midnight, Jennie was awakened. There was a fire. The house was burning. Jennie and several of the children managed to escape. George got outside as well. But 5 children were missing. 14-year-old Maurice, 12-year-old Martha, 9-year-old Louis, 8-year-old Jennie, and 5-year-old Betty. The family believed they were still upstairs. George immediately tried to find a way back inside, but the flames were spreading rapidly through the wooden structure. He looked for a ladder that was normally kept outside the house, hoping to reach the upper floors from the outside. According to the family, the ladder was gone. George couldn't reach his children. The family also tried to call for help, but according to the Sodders, their telephone was not working. They later believed that the telephone line had been cut. Eventually, someone managed to contact the authorities, but by then the house was already engulfed. The fire destroyed the building. When daylight came, the Sodder family was left standing among the ruins. 5 children were missing. The obvious assumption was that they had died inside. But then came the first major mystery. The family could not find their remains. There is a straightforward explanation. A house fire can reach extremely high temperatures, and the Sodder home had collapsed during the blaze. Human remains can be badly damaged by fire, and in 1945, investigators did not have the forensic technology available today. But George and Jennie were not convinced. They began examining everything that had happened that night. The fire itself was immediately suspicious to George. That suspicion was partly connected to threats he had reportedly received before Christmas. According to the family, George had once been confronted by an insurance salesman who warned him that his house would be destroyed and his children would be destroyed with it. The Sodders believed the threat was connected to George's political views, but there was never definitive evidence proving that the man who made the threat had anything to do with the fire. Still, the family couldn't ignore it. Then there was the telephone line. If the family's account was correct, the phone had been rendered useless at the exact moment they needed it most. The ladder was also reportedly found away from its normal location, and George's truck, which he tried to use during the emergency, reportedly would not start. Each detail could have an innocent explanation. The telephone line can fail, a ladder can be moved, a vehicle can malfunction, but when all 3 details were considered alongside the missing children, the family saw something more sinister. They began to wonder whether the fire had been deliberately designed to prevent them from rescuing the children. And then came another possibility. Perhaps the children had never been inside the burning house when it caught fire. Perhaps they had been taken. That theory was difficult to prove, but the family began hearing reports that seemed to support it. There were claims that people had seen children near the property around the time of the fire. Other reports suggested that a vehicle had been seen in the area. Some witnesses claimed to have seen suspicious people or activity, but none of these reports could be conclusively verified. That is one of the greatest difficulties with the Sodder case. The original event happened in a matter of hours, but the investigation lasted for decades. As stories were repeated, details changed, memories faded, newspapers reported rumors, witnesses interpreted what they had seen. Over time, the line between documented evidence and family belief became increasingly difficult to draw. But the Sodders continued searching. They contacted authorities. They circulated photographs. They followed leads from strangers. They refused to allow the case to disappear. Eventually, they took their search to the public. The family erected a large billboard displaying photographs of the 5 missing children. Their faces stared out at passing motorists. The billboard was more than an advertisement. It was a desperate appeal. George and Jennie wanted people to remember their children. They wanted someone to come forward. And most importantly, they wanted the possibility that the children were still alive to remain open. Years passed, then decades. The family received reports from people who claimed to have seen the children. Some of the leads may have been sincere. Others were probably mistaken. Some may have been deliberate hoaxes. But one particular piece of evidence became especially famous: a photograph. Years after the disappearance, the Sodder family received a photograph of a young man. The photograph showed a man sitting outdoors, and a message on the back reportedly suggested that he was one of the missing Sodder children. The family believed the man looked remarkably similar to Louis Sodder, who had been 9 years old when he disappeared. If the photograph really showed Louis as an adult, then the implications were enormous. At least one of the children could have survived. Jennie Sodder believed she recognized her son, but once again, there was no way to prove it. The identity of the man in the photograph was never conclusively established. There was no reliable chain of evidence connecting him to Louis. No confirmed records, no definitive witness, no trail leading from the photograph to the other children. It was a tantalizing clue, but it was not proof, and that distinction matters. The Sodder case is full of things that are possible, but possibility is not evidence. The same problem exists with the fire itself. If the children died in the house, why were their remains not found? The answer may simply be that the fire was extremely destructive. Modern forensic science has shown that fires can cause devastating damage to human remains. And the investigation in 1945 was conducted without DNA analysis, advanced bone identification, or modern fire scene reconstruction. If the remains were badly burned, scattered, or destroyed, investigators may simply have lacked the ability to identify them. There is another problem. Whatever evidence existed at the scene was not preserved indefinitely. The house was gone. The debris was eventually removed. Witnesses grew old and died. Memories became less reliable. And decades later, there was little physical evidence left that could be re-examined. This is what makes the case so frustrating. If the children were killed in the fire, the evidence that could have proved it may have disappeared almost immediately. If they survived, the evidence proving that may have disappeared as well. George and Jennie were therefore left in the worst possible position. They had no bodies to bury, no confirmed evidence of survival, and no explanation that they were willing to accept. For them, the absence of remains meant the story was not over. George continued searching for answers. So did Jennie. George eventually died in 1968. Jennie continued to believe that her children might have survived. She kept photographs of them, and she never fully accepted that the fire had ended their lives. The mystery became part of the family's identity. But what actually happened that night? There are several possibilities. The first is the simplest. The children died in the fire. The blaze may have been accidental, possibly caused by an electrical fault. The house burned intensely, collapsed, and destroyed the evidence. It is tragic, but it is possible. The second possibility is that the children somehow escaped. Perhaps they were not in their bedrooms when the fire started. If that happened, however, another question immediately appears. Where did they go? Why did none of them return? Why did no confirmed record of their lives ever emerge? And why would 5 children disappear without leaving behind a reliable trail? The third possibility is kidnapping. Perhaps someone deliberately removed the children from the property. Perhaps the fire was started to destroy evidence. The missing telephone line and ladder could, under this theory, have been part of a deliberate plan to prevent rescue. But this theory has serious problems too. Who took them? Why were they targeted? Where were they taken? What happened to them afterward? And why has no definitive evidence identifying a kidnapper ever been found? There is also a possibility that the truth is much less dramatic than either theory. Perhaps the fire was accidental. Perhaps the telephone failed naturally. Perhaps the truck simply malfunctioned. Perhaps the ladder was moved for an ordinary reason. Perhaps witnesses saw confusing events during a chaotic night and later remembered them differently. And perhaps the 5 children really did die in the fire. Sometimes several strange events can happen at the same time without being connected. But for George and Jennie, accepting that explanation without physical evidence was almost impossible. Imagine being told that 5 of your children are dead. Now imagine having no bodies, no grave, no final moment, no certainty. You would always have a question in the back of your mind. What if they're alive? What if somebody took them? What if they're somewhere else? That uncertainty can be more painful than grief. And perhaps that is why the Sodders kept searching for so long. The 5 children were not simply names in a mystery. They were real people. Maurice, Martha, Louis, Jennie, Betty. They had birthdays, they had friends, they had favorite things, they had plans for their lives. And then on Christmas Eve, they disappeared. More than 80 years have now passed. The people who witnessed the fire are gone. The investigators are gone. George and Jennie are gone. The 5 children, if they died that night, would have lived entire adult lives by now. They might have married, they might have had children, they might have built careers and grown old. Or they may have died in the house that burned on Christmas Eve. We simply don't know. And that is why the Sodder case continues to fascinate people. It isn't just a mystery about a fire. It is a mystery about 5 lives that seem to have vanished between one moment and the next. There are theories, there are photographs, there are witness accounts, but there is no definitive answer. Perhaps one day some forgotten document will surface. Perhaps a family photograph or personal record will reveal something that has been overlooked. Perhaps modern forensic techniques could still uncover information from evidence that survived. Or perhaps the final answer disappeared with the flames. For now, the most honest conclusion is also the most frustrating. We know that the Sodder home burned on Christmas Eve, 1945. We know that George and Jennie survived. We know that 5 of their children disappeared. We know that the family never recovered confirmed remains. And we know that their parents spent decades searching for an answer. Beyond that, certainty becomes difficult. Were the 5 children victims of a devastating fire? Were they taken from their home? Did some other chain of events unfold that night that investigators never understood? But the Sodder family made sure the world would remember the children who disappeared. Maurice, Martha, Louis, Jennie, and Betty. 5 children, one Christmas Eve, one terrible fire, and a question that has survived for more than 8 decades. What really happened to the Sodder children?